All right, good evening, everyone. I'm David Leaptag, sitting in for my colleague, Civi Ryder, the Director of Children's Services at Ohel. I serve as Ohel School Support Services Director. I want to welcome all of you to our THRU webinar called Building Resilience in Children. In just a minute, we'll welcome Dr. Norman Blumenthal, my colleague, to begin the discussion of a really important resource for our children, Ohel's My COVID-19 Resilience Workbook. Dr. Blumenthal will discuss building resilience from a psychological perspective. I will follow his presentation with a review of the workbook. Ohel has been offering these THRU webinars since the pandemic began so many months ago. They've been just part of the way we've transitioned our services during a very traumatic time. It's always been Ohel's mission to care for the emotional, developmental, and mental health needs of our community. And I've been really proud that the way that we found really overnight to reach out in new ways to continue to help our community and the individuals in our care. Who imagined we could do so much virtually? So we would like to acknowledge UJA Federation for their support of our efforts to bring this workbook to schools, and to our co-sponsor for this evening, Hidden Sparks, who truly do outstanding work in bringing high quality educational training to our yeshivas and day schools. I would like to ask Sarah Diamond, Director of School Services at Hidden Sparks, to offer a few words of introduction.
Thank you so much to Dr. Blumenthal and Rabbi Liebtag. You know, to the degree that we attempt to uncover some silver linings in the cloud in which we find ourselves right now, I can say that for us at Hidden Sparks, the opportunity to build our relationship with Ohel and to collaborate with you over the last year has really been a gift to us. Your work in the community and for the community truly complements our efforts in schools, and it's been a privilege to work with you. When Civi Ryder first told me about the workbook that you were developing, I was really looking forward to sharing it with our schools. And then when she told me on top of that, that you could provide some dedicated training to our greater Hidden Sparks family and network, I was thrilled. So thank you again so much for this opportunity, and I really look forward to learning from you tonight.
Thank you. And now I'm so pleased to welcome my colleague, Dr. Norman Blumenthal, OHEL's Director and Zachter Family Chair in Trauma and Crisis Response, to begin our program this evening. Thank you all for joining us tonight.
Okay, and I too will have a brief introduction before I start my introduction. First of all, I think David very much reminds me of the comedian who said he's going to rewrite his autobiography to include himself. So I think we have to thank David Leaptag, or David Leaptag, for all his work on this manual, all the work that he does for children in the community. I think we also have to acknowledge at this time another group of co-collaborators, and I echo what Sarah said in terms of one of the fringe benefits has been the relationships we've established. But I want to particularly mention Dr. Naomi Baum from Meitiv in Israel, who co-authored this workbook with us. Naomi and I go back a very long time, before we were even dreaming of being professionals, and it's really great to be collaborating with her. And I also want to thank Ohel, our CEO, David Mendel, and Tammy Kornfeld, as our Director of PR, who's online with us, for also doing everything they can make this possible. And of course, our tech team, our Secretary Laura Bart, and the tech people who make this possible as well. I have a brief PowerPoint. I did a little something different tonight. And my goal will be to just introduce you to the notion of resilience. What I want to try to demonstrate to you is how some of the very fundamental parenting that all of us have engaged in are the seeds of building resilience, emotional resilience in children, and how you're going to see, as David goes through the manual, that we're further nurturing some very fundamental skills that should be all very familiar to us. So 1 second, I'm sorry. Let me first find my PowerPoint. Hold on. Here we go. Share. Okay. Oh, who can share? No, it's not something I want here. This. Okay, you should be able to. Everybody sees it. You don't see it. You don't see the PowerPoint. I see Sarah saying no. David, you don't see it.
It's a black screen.
A black screen. Oh, I had this once before. Hold on. Black screen. Let me just try the next slide. And still a black screen?
So far, yeah.
Great. So that's a problem. I once had this before and I solved it, and I don't remember how I solved it. Okay, hold on. Let me try that again. If not, I'm going to have to just do this.
You could send it to me and I could try to get it on. Maybe.
Yeah, I'm going to try one. Oh, you know, one more thing. Let me, hold on. I got an interesting idea. Hold on. Now, give me a second. What I'm gonna do is, hold on a second. You still see a black screen, right? No, still see a black screen. Okay, let me close it.
Someone says to check to see if the folder is open. I don't know what that means.
Stop share. Give me a second. You don't see anything still.
Well, not yet, right? There's no share screen
Okay,
at all right now.
and show. Okay, I'm gonna close it and reopen it and see if that does it. And if not, I'll send it to you, David. And hold on. Documents, PowerPoints, resilience. Okay, now let me come back to you. Come back to, okay. Someone's chatting. Maybe they're telling me something I'm doing wrong. Check to see if the folder's open. It is open. Yes. I just reopened it. Share screen. Okay. You don't see this, do you?
It said Norman. It said Norman was sharing it, and then it died.
This again, black.
Yeah, you are sharing your screen, but for some reason the file is appearing black. I think that what makes the most sense is maybe just to email it to Rabbi Liebtag. You can start talking in the meantime, and he'll.
Okay. So let me close it and show. Give me a second, and I will. I'm going to email it to Rabbi Liebtag. Yeah. 1 second. I'm sorry about this. I apologize to the participants. This happened to me once before, and I forgot how I solved it then.
Dr. Blumenthal has given plenty presentations on responding to adversity. I'm sure I'll be able to handle this.
Okay, David Liebtag, here we go. Let me attach my PowerPoint. Notice how calm I am, and
I was just going
to PowerPoints. Okay, it's coming to David. Okay. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to hold on. Okay. So let's. I have to do this now by heart because I'm not sharing my screen. Did you get it, David?
Not yet. Probably went to China first.
Yeah.
Oh, here it goes. Okay.
Okay. By the way, there's a question whether this is being recorded, and yes, it is being recorded. So we will be able to listen to it again. I do it by heart, but you don't see the cartoons then.
Cartoons are the best part.
Yeah. Oh, that's somebody offered an interesting solution, but okay. Now, how's that? People see that? Yeah. Okay. All right, but I can't change it. So I'm just going to ask you to change okay. Very good. You see that? Okay, good. So go to the next slide, David. Okay, so where does resilience come from? So it's nurtured in early life, largely through parent-child interactions. That we are from almost the earliest stages of childhood developing in a way imparting resilience to children. And again, what you're going to see is that a lot of what was done in this workbook, and this workbook was really terrific. I can say that because I only had a very small role in putting it together. So I can give Sivi, and by the way, we wish Sivi a refuah shlema. We miss her. But Sivi and David and Dr. Baum, Naomi Baum, a lot of credit for an excellent workbook. But it's reinforcing and further developing these skills that started at a very young age. They're individual and distinct. So even though we're talking in generalities, just keep in mind that everybody has their preferred coping mechanisms and their areas of strength. So it needs to be tailored to individual, and like any skill, it needs to be reinforced and exercised. So we teach children at very young ages how to walk and how to use their gross muscle skills, but gross muscle skills have to constantly be nurtured and developed. So too, emotional resilience, emotional muscles have to be developed as well. Okay, Dave, on the next slide. Okay, so here's our first scenario that we're going to analyze, which is 4-year-old Tommy's cupcake falls to the floor, of course, before he gets to eat it. Okay, so this is, first of all, it's a question. This is tantamount to the 1929 stock market crash, Hiroshima, the JFK assassination, 9/11, coronavirus, and all of the above. So we know what a tragedy this would be to a 4-year-old. So how do we help this 4-year-old cope with this crisis, so at later points when he has more adult-like crises, he can cope with them? Okay, the next slide, David. Yeah, okay. So we're going to consider 3 different types of parents. And the cartoon says I've got them on vibrate. Okay, 3 types of parental responses, and I want you to think about which one nurtures the most resilience and for what reasons. Okay, so parent number 1 tells him stop being such a baby, grabs another cupcake and plunks it on the table. Okay, that's parent number 1. Next slide. Okay, parent number 2, and here we have the helicopter parent support group. Okay, parent number 2 runs over to the child, smothers him with kisses, telling him how bad she feels, gives him 2 new cupcakes and begs him to stop crying. Okay, that's parent number 2. And parent number 3. Okay, parent number 3, and again, I had a very scary dream that I wasn't getting any attention. Okay, parent number 3 hugs the child, acknowledges how upset he is, assures him that there's another cupcake, which he then produces, gives him a kiss, and goes back to whatever he was doing. Now, I think it's fairly apparent to all of us that parent number 3 is the one that nurtures the most resilience. What I'd like you to do, if this is maybe a discussion, we could have discussions, it's a too large a group, but why? What is this parent number 3 doing that perhaps the other parents didn't do as well? And how is this parent, by these reactions, by hugging the child, acknowledging how upset he is, producing another cupcake, and then ending the interaction, how is this parent developing resilience? Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, this you're gonna have to do one at a time. So as I said, maybe you've thought about it, but I'll sort of enumerate it for you, and probably most of you have guessed these examples. Okay, click once, please, David. Just click again. Oh, no, back. Here we go. It was supposed to come down one at a time, but okay. So first of all, the emotions are validated and proportionate to the event. So the mother acknowledges to the child that the child's distress is appropriate. So again, if we translate this into later life when there's a challenge such as the pandemic, the distress that the children are feeling is appropriate. The mother doesn't overreact, or the father, we're going to say parent, okay? The parent doesn't overreact, make it into more of a crisis than it should be, and doesn't, like, let's say, like parent number 2, and doesn't under-respond as if this, not validating the fact that there's something distressing happening to the child. So as you're going to hear in the workbook, to modulate the right emotions, to be in touch with one's emotions, and to know that one's emotions are commensurate with the crisis they're facing is nurtured in the workbook and is nurtured here. When the workbook culls and pulls for the right kind of emotion that the person is feeling, it's nurtured by this parent, because the parent acknowledges it but doesn't over or under acknowledge it. Okay, so that's point number 1. Point number 2, the cry evokes a response from a helper who's effective in solving the crisis. Effectively solve the crisis. So what the child learns then is that I can reach out to potential helpers who will then respond in kind and help me with this crisis. So even though the child is maybe being sort of, it seems like it's just being passively helped, the child evoked the proper response in the parent. And again, the parent's response in situation number 3 is the perfect response to the crisis. It isn't an under response. It isn't an exaggerated response. So now the child is learning, I had a legitimate concern, I had legitimate anxiety, I identified it, that was reinforced, and I can be effective in getting the perfect amount of assistance from the outside because my cry was a call for assistance. So now the child feels effective in solving the crisis. For the child has learned, I can have such an enormous crisis like my cupcake falling on the floor, and I can do something that resolves it, and I get a new cupcake. Okay? Now the child has had it. The child's feelings have been reinforced. It has been validated that for a child his age, he has a crisis that's legitimate. The crisis has been solved, so now he feels effective, or she feels effective. In this case, Tommy, he feels effective in solving the crisis and getting the assistance that he needs. So there's a belief that I can be in a difficult situation. I can get the help that I need proportionate to the crisis. The child is grateful now because the child has gotten the cupcake. Now we're going to talk in a few minutes what role gratitude has in developing resilience. And actually, this is the sort of the answer is the child feels confident as protect his world system even in the future. So now this is a child who has confidence that if I face challenging situations in the future, I have the wherewithal and the environment that I live in is trustworthy and reliable so that I can now resolve this crisis. So I see there's some chats and questions. Let me just quickly pull those up. Okay. Okay, could child be encouraged to come up with solutions depending on developmental level? Yes, I'm taking a very young child, so I wouldn't naturally anticipate that. Later on, as the child has had more experience and has developed this concept that crises occur and I'm effective in solving them, then we could ask, I'm not sure if we would ask a 4-year-old whose cupcake just fell to come up with a solution. Maybe you would, it depends maybe how precocious the child is, but I think that's a good point at a later stage. And that's what you'll see in the note in the workbook. The workbook is very evocative of the child. In other words, tries to get the child to come up with solutions, but the child's reference points are these earlier experiences. Okay, there's a Q&A also. Oh, nothing, okay. All right. So that's an example then of one example. I'm going to give a second one, again, where you can see in early childhood experience how some of the very notions and concepts that were developed in the workbook are being applied. So here the next crisis that we're going to address is 3-year-old Sharon is being told that she cannot go to sleep with her pacifier. We've all been there, right? Okay, let me just, again, there was a Q&A. Oh no, that we did already. Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't see that. Okay. Okay, David, the next one. Okay, so 3 types of parents' responses. Okay, again, the most that is not working. Can I go back on volume? Okay. Parent one announces it to Sharon, peremptorily takes away the pacifier, allowing the child to cry herself to sleep until she gets used to it. Okay, that's parenting solution number 1. Parenting solution number 2, and again, this is a older brother says to the younger brother, they pay the bills, but you and I basically run the place. Pleads with Sharon to stop crying and ultimately gives in and returns the pacifier to the child. Okay, that's parenting number 2. And parent number 3 acknowledges child's distress, but assures her that big girls don't sleep with pacifiers, gives her a kiss, and promises to buy her a special doll if she learns to sleep without her pacifier. Now, clearly, again, parent number 3 is nurturing the most resilience. But let's think to ourselves, how is this parent developing the type of resilience that, again, we're going to witness and we're going to see further developed in the workbook. Okay, so the next one, okay, and click again, because I did it as to go down. I think you have to click again for the choices. No? Okay, there we go. All right, so again, like we had before, there's a response that's commensurate with the tragedy. Okay, so in other words, the parent doesn't over-respond like parent number 2, doesn't under-respond like parent number 1. Parent has a response. This is hard for the child. The child is used to going to sleep with the pacifier. It's understandable that the child is distressed by losing this. Okay, now what does the parent do? Focus on more long-term goals and rewards. Yes, it's going to be hard, but if you do it, you're going to get a doll Now, what are we doing? We're going to talk later, when we talk about the workbook, about finding meaning and being able to sort of leave the situation you're in and anticipate an ending. In the workbook, it's going to talk about what like anticipating what life is going to be like after COVID. This is nurtured at this very young age, because the message to the child is, yes, it's hard. If you can contain yourself and if you can refrain, you will in some future date get something really very much desired. So again, the parent, maybe not even knowing that, is teaching the child basically the capacity to find, to look towards a solution, not to be mired in the current crisis. And then focus on growth. Big girls don't sleep with pacifiers. Crises, sometimes the way to grow and the way to get to the next stage in life is to go through a difficult period. And when we talk later in the workbook about meaning making and finding some hidden lessons in through the crisis, or what Sarah referred to later as the silver lining, this is already nurtured at this point, because you have to go through a painful experience to grow. In fact, Bruno Bettelheim, in his classic book, The Uses of Enchantment, where he sort of psychoanalyzes fairy tales, he mentions something very interesting about fairy tales. So if you look at your typical fairy tale, there's a main character and there's secondary characters. The main character has a crisis. The secondary characters don't have a crisis. The main character at the end of the fairy tale is better off. The secondary characters are the same where they were before. So you take Cinderella. Cinderella has the crisis with the ball and the slipper, whatever, the whole story. The sisters have no crisis. End of the story, Cinderella is the princess, but the sisters are the same sisters. And the message to the child is, yes, there are crises, but you grow from crises. You get to the next stage. So we're ready at this very early stage, nurturing this. And then as I said, future gratitude. Later on, there's gratitude for what the parent had done, even if they don't experience it now. Well, I just see there's some chats. Isn't a child a kind of big reward? Okay, maybe it's been a while since I'm a grandfather, so maybe inflation has taken over. Maybe the dollar is a big one. Big girls don't. No, we're not telling you not to cry. I'm sorry. No, we don't say big girls. Oh, the big girls don't go to sleep with a pacifier. Yeah, are we shaming the child? If we're shaming the child, then it won't be effective. But if we're saying it in the spirit of, don't you want to be a big girl? Don't you want to grow? Don't you want to be more mature? And this is the way to do it. So maybe there'd be a better way. Again, it might have been many years that I've taken a pacifier away from a child, and maybe I've lost the touch. But and probably I didn't do it. But again, the message that we're doing something that is now difficult and painful for a future benefit, for growth, is something we're already conveying to children this young. Okay, we go to the next one. Yeah. So here, by the way, as I mentioned several times, it all happens to be because I'm in the middle of this book, so I'm going to promote it. But very interesting set of studies by David Stano, who was at Northeastern, I believe, about emotional success, and he talks about gratitude and self-control. Very interesting is that his main point, which again, in many of these books, I hate to say, they have a point that they sort of reiterate and say over and over again in many different ways, but his main point in the book is that we think that we establish self-control through strength, through restraint, through being, looking at that delicious piece of chocolate cake, but having the wherewithal, the willpower to resist the chocolate cake. And what he found from his studies was that actually gratitude is a better way, is a better form, induces more self-control. And his theory, the premise of his theory, that's his research find, the premise of his theory is that gratitude really says that the world is a good place, that there's a good future because I can trust people. So the restraint from holding back from the chocolate cake or from doing something that's immediately gratifying is because of past experiences of positive experiences with people who give to you, and therefore the anticipation that in the future there will also be positive experiences. And that seems to nurture more self-constraint than pure willpower. But interesting at the end, again, we see how that's being nurtured at a very young age. And one more slide, and David, and you're going to take over. So again, these are the 4 basic tools in the manual, which David's going to reiterate. But again, understanding mind-body connection, identifying, expressing emotions, controlling feelings, and finding safety, hope, and meaning. I hope what I've been able to demonstrate is that these are very fundamental skills that we're nurturing without probably being aware of it, and ones that we're further entrenching and developing in the workbook. So at this point then, and again, I apologize for all the problems with the PowerPoints, and I hand it over to David to now introduce us to the workbook and go through it.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Blumenthal. I know I now have a new credential to put on my resume as a slide advancer in PowerPoint. So I want to thank you for giving me that opportunity. So I want to thank all of you for coming. I think it's a good idea for everybody just to take a little stretch for a minute, as a way of sort of relaxing. I appreciate the amount of time that you're giving for this, and I realize that sitting for an hour and a half with 2 PowerPoints can be deadly. So I appreciate it if you just take a minute to stretch, refasten your seatbelts, and get ready to move on. I have a short agenda to review with you briefly, and then we'll go into the presentation. I want to talk about trauma-sensitive schools, specifically what that is, and I think many of you are familiar with it, but I want to just review it specifically during the time of COVID. We'll talk about the keys to resilience in schools, specifically taking off some of the terminology that Dr. Blumenthal used. I want to talk specifically about using the workbook effectively in the classroom. We're going to run through the entire workbook, spending a little time on some of the pages, not all of the pages. And I should say that for schools that want to participate in this program, which we'll talk about later, we will be able to customize a staff development seminar for your teachers to be able to truly dive into the workbook to appreciate the various skills that are being taught. Then I'll share with you how you can request an examination copy if you haven't already done so, how you can order workbooks for your school, and how you can actually implement an overall comprehensive program in your schools, utilizing a number of resources that we put together. So we are almost completing 1 year of COVID, and COVID has affected all of us. This is a traumatic event, and everyone deals with trauma in their own way, but COVID is uniquely different because it's a communal trauma. It's affected all of us, and therefore even the people that are in the position to help have also been affected by trauma. So we just need to keep that in mind and be very sensitive to the issues of trauma, which has given rise to the concept of trauma-sensitive schools. If you think of the traumas our children have been exposed to recently: quarantine, disruption in routine, illness, death, political unrest, riots, anti-Semitism, overexposure to the media. And if you had a chance to get away from your desk today and watch the news today with the terrible thing that's going on in Washington, perhaps as we speak, there's a lot of research on the increase in trauma in the lives of children and its short and long-term effects on children. Traumas have been linked to poor academic performance, decreased reading ability, and lower high school graduation rates, as well as mental and physical problems later in life. Anxiety is the leading mental health issue in our country today, and we are also experiencing a rise in anxiety in children. There are a number of possible reasons for this, but the COVID trauma has only exacerbated the issue, and we need to be responsive to the increased need to be sensitive to this rise. Therefore, a need for trauma-sensitive schools, and the workbook that I'll be sharing with you shortly. And that's why I strongly hope that you take this quote from the book by Jen Alexander with you as you leave. Students will not have the internal energy for learning and growth if their safety and belonging needs are not met first. So kids that have been traumatized have issues of safety and certainly belonging, and we'll talk about how we can deal with that in a moment. So trauma-sensitive schools are becoming more sensitive to trauma and its effects. Kids can feel unsafe and stressed. Therefore, schools are becoming more proactive in addressing this problem. Remember, children spend much of their waking hours in school, and the most important thing in the school environment to affect the children's overall mental health is the teacher. So we want schools that are sensitive to this concept to realize the widespread prevalence of trauma, recognize the signs and symptoms of trauma and how trauma affects all people in the school, seeks to promote healing and resilience by focusing on safety and relationships, and finally, the importance of the teacher. and what that looks like. What can schools do to build resilience? So they need to become knowledgeable and informed about trauma. Resilience is a muscle that you can grow and develop. You should also understand that children returning to school have experienced a collective trauma. Understand that all children react differently to trauma, and understand that trauma reactions can emerge later when some semblance of routine has been established. And therefore, we need to look at our students today, particularly during the year of COVID, to what we call a trauma-informed lens. When everyone looks at students through this specific trauma-informed lens, uh, we realize one thing in terms of the organization, that healing begins at the front door. Everyone in the school, not just the teachers, but the custodial staff, the security staff, office staff, all need to be sensitized to issues of trauma. And this lens of looking through kids through the trauma-informed lens changes the shift of focus, how we look at dealing with children and their issues. So we move from looking at a child that has a certain problem from, what's wrong with you, to what happened to you. Or perhaps look at it another way from a perspective of a classroom teacher. All right, look at this nice happy teacher and these two happy children. All right, teacher thinking in her own mind, oh my gosh, why is this student giving me a hard time? Of course, why is this PowerPoint giving me a hard time? And why is this student having such a hard time? Look at the difference, the change in perspective when you understand how kids have been affected by trauma that's going on in their lives today. So what is resilience made of? Dr. Blumenthal sort of elaborated them. I just want to briefly share them with you and then move on. We talk about the mind-body connection, coping through connection, understanding and regulating emotions, and meaning and hope. These are the foundations that build safety and strengthen relationships that help kids become more resilient and bounce back from adversity. That's the purpose of that spring on the side of the slide. So the mind-body connection gives kids an understanding that emotions just don't happen to children. They can move in and out of emotions. They can actually control their emotions, and that is an issue of self-awareness that brings that empowers children to actually begin to have control over emotions and not let emotions control them. That's the mind-body connection. Coping through connection, children finding or building resilience through relationships with people who can make you feel safe and calm. Too often, trauma is caused by hurtful relationships from people who you trust. You consider things like domestic violence or neglect or sexual abuse. So rebuilding those connections through meaningful relationships is so critical and so important to kids. That's coping through connection. And the third one is regulating emotions. Children need to learn to have confidence in their ability to identify emotions and self-regulate. Giving children the opportunity to freely discuss their feelings and identify what works for them individually to bring a sense of calm and equilibrium help them build their resilience. And finally, meaning and hope. Giving children time to discuss how they overcame adversity and how they envision the future is a very empowering strength. And again, providing a sense of control to the children. And then the final thing I just want to emphasize the significant, important role of the teacher. Significant research highlights the seminal role that a caring teacher-student relationship has in ensuring healthy outcomes of students, and particularly with children who have gone through trauma. Oftentimes, teachers downplay the actual important value they play in the life of children. As we said earlier, children spend significant amount of their waking hours in schools and with teachers. And so teachers need to understand, even though they have so many other demands put on them, but the significant effect they can have on a child that goes way beyond the third grade or the fifth grade classroom. So let's start talking about our resilience workbook. I just want to mention that kids different kids need different, interventions. We take an approach in OHEL in terms of what we call universal application of these skills. In other words, some kids may need more teaching, some need less teaching, but all kids would benefit from being exposed to these concepts, and that's really what the book is all about. Um, so, just briefly, what is the purpose of the workbook? Simply to give kids a chance to learn both about and how to express feelings related to COVID-19. How do we use the keys of resilience to help children heal and grow? And we bring resilience into the classroom in an easy manner. The book was designed for teachers, not for mental health professionals. You don't have to be a psychologist or a social worker to be able to do this. And finally, provide teachers with the opportunity to encourage social and emotional growth in the classroom. And the COVID thing that we can develop if we have a personalized training for your staff is the red flags, and as responses to certain questions within the workbook. If the children respond in a way that may be atypical, that may tip off the teacher there's some issue that goes on, and it requires alerting a mental health professional to deal with the issue. We'll talk about that as we go through the workbook. And finally, I know if having been someone who worked with teachers for many years, teachers say, oh no, one more thing I got to do. So I think it's important to understand, again, like I said before, teachers have a significant effect on the quality of relationships that children experience during their early foundational years. Teachers' roles, frankly, are changing. Dr. Blumenthal has spoken about this many times, but teachers do need to develop their skills in the areas of quasi-mental health to be able to help identify kids who may have some issues that need to be addressed, and also to provide and encourage the positive social and emotional skills that help them overcome adversity. And the most important thing for teachers to remember is that kids who feel calm in the classroom are in a better position to learn. And so even though it may take some extra time for teachers to implement some of these ideas and teach some of these skills, in the long run, it'll actually help them be more effective educators. So one of the first things that it's important for teachers to do in presenting this workbook is to explain to the kids why we're doing this. What's the buy-in? Why should I bother opening the book? I think that's important for every teacher, knowing her own class and at a developmentally appropriate level, to explain that to children. And one of the simple way, and you can extrapolate and use it any way you want, but kids need to know that the trauma of COVID caused a lot of people to have very strong emotions, and very strong emotions can have an effect on the way that you think and the way that you feel. And just taking that idea and explaining that to children and helping them understand that the skills they're learning in this book are going to help them deal with strong feelings that sometimes make them feel uncomfortable. And what can they do to calm themselves down? Another thing to realize when you start this book is the questions that the children are going to be exposed to are questions that they've really never had an opportunity to respond to in school or anywhere else for that matter. And so there's no right answer that's been taught previously by the teacher or the parent. So kids are going to be asked questions they've really never thought about before. And frankly, many adults have not seriously thought about some of the questions that you'll find in this book. But what is important for the kids to know is that their answers are, in fact, their answers. It becomes their personal property, their intellectual property, but their guidebook for dealing with feelings later on in life. And we'll go through some of the pages in the resilience workbook to focus on what are some of the key areas that are being discussed on each page. And when it's introduced, the book, we suggest 2 or 3 pages at most a week. Again, each teacher can make that decision themselves. But as you go through the book, you'll see that some of these pages require a little time to sort of process and become more meaningful in the lives of the kids. So the book starts off with a pretty typical, beginning of any book for children, where they put their name and so forth. And I want to emphasize the opening page because this is a personal book. This book belongs to this child, and this book is personalized for this child. And that needs to be emphasized to the children when you present the workbook, that everybody's book is their own. It's a unique text. Nobody else has the same book. And it's about me and how I process feelings. That's why everyone's picture will be uniquely different. And so at the very beginning of the book, we also talk about what actually happened. One of the ways that experts deal with trauma is to make sure that people understand, in this case, children, what it is that actually occurred. You know, kids are known to be excellent observers, but not necessarily the best interpreters. So we have to make sure the kids know exactly what happened. Kids have heard a lot of things. Some parents have chosen actually not to discuss COVID with their children. Others have said too much. So we need to have a balance there. So we want kids to tell us, what do they actually know about COVID? And what questions do they have about COVID? And also to sort of ground them a little bit in terms of what did they do during quarantine. And by the way, quarantine is probably the hardest word to read in the book, but once you show the kids the word, they'll get that one. So more questions that are sort of foundational questions. What am I learning about myself during COVID-19, and what do I enjoy doing? Questions like this may actually require a little bit of prodding, especially for the younger children, to go beyond one-word responses. But having them, again, think about things that they haven't necessarily responded to anybody in the past about, you know, what I enjoy during COVID and so forth, and certainly how I stay connected with my friends. Again, that social connection that we want to focus on. Yeah. And then on these pages here, we start with the first area that we spoke about in terms of resilience, the mind-body connection, where kids understand that their feelings also have an effect on their body. And so we ask kids to think about the feelings that are on the page and sort of draw a line to where you feel those feelings in your body. Oftentimes kids have not thought about that, and they may need some prompting. And certainly for a teacher to talk about butterflies in the stomach goes a long way in helping kids begin to identify physiological sensations to psychological feelings. And that's important to make that connection, because eventually we're going to guide the kids to realize that they can actually think through a feeling to either, you know, increase it or decrease it depending what the feeling is. You can increase calm, you can decrease sadness. There are ways you can do this. And on the following page, we talk about strong feelings, like we said at the very beginning. But we tell kids that sometimes we can calm our bodies when we don't like how we feel. So for the first time, kids are hearing something they may not have heard before, that yes, they can control their feelings. And we move on now. Now, the next 5 pages or so are roughly the same, except we're different with different feelings. The 4 basic feelings that we always talk about with young children are happy, sad, anger, and scared, or we use the word worried. But we added a fifth feeling. We'll get to that in a minute. But each of the pages looks at these primary feelings that kids have and ask them to respond freely. When I feel happy, for example, ... Now, ... means you fill it in. It's free-flowing question. And it's amazing to see what kids will write down when there's no specific answer. They just come from their own internal experiences. How they respond is quite fascinating. But each of those questions, then we ask the kids to 4 basic questions, which are somewhat repetitive on each page. When I feel happy, this is how I show it. When I feel happy, my body feels. What I do to feel happy, and things that make me feel happy. The third question there, what do I do to feel happy, is a key question that helps kids realize that they can actually do something to ignite that feeling of happiness. All right, so that's happy. Then we go to sad, similar questions. By the way, on each page, there is like a barometer, a measuring tool for kids to actually indicate how they feel right now. So when it comes to sad, for example, not at all, a little, medium, a lot, or very. So they can actually sort of take their own personal blood pressure when they're going through this book. And again, you'll see the questions on the right side are generally repeated. We go to angry. All right, same idea, same pictures. All right. Like the third question, for example, this is what I do to let people know that I am angry. If a child responded here, I go to my room and I cry, that's one answer. But if a child says that I take my toys and I throw them all over the house, or I kick my mother, or something along that line, that can be an indicator that that child may, need to be seen by a professional. But at least it's a red flag. And again, if we do it in an individualized session for your schools, we'll talk about those red flags that you can see in every one of this, in many of these different emotions. But this is how the book can be helpful to tip teachers off to start questioning about this child, particularly if it ties into behaviors in class, and then alert a mental health professional to take it to the next step. And then the other third feeling is like when I feel worried. And this I like to actually do with adults, to tell them to pause for a minute and actually look at the questions yourself. We don't have an opportunity to have feedback now, but I'll just pause for a moment and let you take a look at these questions and see how you would answer them. All right? When I feel worried, ... When I feel worried, it helps me too. Things that make me feel worried. When I feel worried, my body feels. This is what I do to let people know that I'm worried. So as I've demonstrated this with adults, many of them have said to me that they haven't really thought about some of these questions. And frankly, in terms of teaching this book to a group of teachers, one of the ways that we will do it is actually have the teachers process these questions themselves, so they can actually experience what it's like to process it even at an adult stage. So I'll give you a couple seconds to do that. And then the last feeling that we added, which is unique to dealing with feelings with young children, is a feeling of calmness. So kids know that when they get overstimulated, there is something they can do to calm themselves down. Right? And so what I do to feel calm, things that make me feel calm, people can tell that I'm calm because, and when I feel calm, this is what happens in my body. Again, so each page gives us an opportunity to again revisit the questions that focus on feelings and how they become personalized to each child. And then after we review the basic feelings, we go to visuals. So kids begin to learn to identify feelings by looking at eyes and looking at mouths. Of course, with COVID and masks, we don't get to see that too often. So we have sort of this juxtaposition of faces with masks and faces without masks for kids to sort of figure out the feelings. They get a kick out of doing this because they sort of can figure out the emotion by just checking the hairstyles. But that's another technique, perhaps, of learning feelings. And then on the second page there, where kids have to fill in what the face looks like when I how I feel when I wear a mask, and how I feel when I'm with my friends and so forth. Again, it becomes personalized, and kids really become engaged. I should mention that I did try this with a first grader and a fifth grader myself, and both of them, from their different perspectives, were highly engaged with this text. Obviously, a more sophisticated level for the older children, but the younger children were really connected and became fascinated with the thoughts and concepts that are presented. This is a page here where children will talk about things that they missed during COVID-19, but I still have. And for this, I was just, for example, think about this page and think about what are the four keys of resilience is brought out in this page. Think about it for a second. Mind-body connection, coping through connection, understanding and regulating emotions, or meaning and hope. And by the way, some of these pages can be more than one. And they're not mutually exclusive. It's not a multiple choice test. There's only one right. There could be more than one right. But I think generally, but I still provides some sense of hope in that situation. The next page, where kids are asked to think about events in their life over the last, in this case, almost a year already, to think about what was that event before, during, and after. For example, we could think about what was Pesach like before COVID and what was it like during COVID, and what they sort of think about Pesach would look like in the future. Again, this is having kids look towards the future with a sense of hope, a sense of new vision of how things can be. Right. What I do to feel better. All right. This is this question now, can I share my feelings with, are two critically important questions. If you think about this page, try to think about what what key to resilience is this page focusing on. So here it's coping, through connection, especially the second page, who can I share my feelings with? This is so important for kids to know, that they can share their feelings with and who those people might be. But being able to broaden your base of friendships and people who you can trust goes a long way in being able to build a sense of resilience. Finally, towards the end of the book, we empower students to describe a safe place and how they can maintain safety. So in a certain sense, in terms of how you can, maintain safety, you're not just listening to other people telling you what to do, but you've come up with something yourself. And it'd be fascinating to hear what ideas kids come up with when they talk about how I can become safe and strong. And towards the very end, this also sort of a takeoff of what Dr. Blumenthal was saying towards the end there, but we add gratitude in helping others. And these are some of the new ideas that are coming out from the field of positive psychology. That being thankful, having gratitude of overcoming issues that tie into trauma and negative feelings, and help kids become more and more resilient. And on the last page of the book, we have sort of like a mood meter, where kids almost on a daily basis can sort of measure, or present a measure of how they're feeling for that day. This gives them an opportunity to be self-aware of how they are feeling that day, and sort of keep a check on their feelings on a daily basis. And finally, on the last page, looking ahead, COVID-19 will not last forever. What are the 3 things you'll do when it's over? And write or draw one thing that you hope for. Again, this is looking towards the future, a sense of hope, and perhaps even a sense of meaning. Meaning at this age is a little harder to focus on than it is than hope, but certainly those are two very strong feelings that come out of this last page of the workbook. And that sort of ends the workbook. The good news is you should know about in terms of kids, trauma and resilience. Most kids, about 75 to 80% of kids going through trauma come out okay. They have their own internal ways of dealing with issues. Some 15 to 20% have some symptoms of post-traumatic stress, but it's not diagnosable as PTSD. And then 0.5% of kids, based on the statistics that I've seen, actually have traumatic diagnoses of PTSD. But by and large, kids are pretty resilient, but helping them appreciate the internal workings that they have, the skills that they have to be able to overcome adversity, to deal with hard, strong feelings, is so empowering for kids once they've had that opportunity. When children feel safe and empowered, they learn to help themselves as well as helping us help them. So let's just talk about the developmental approach to implementation of the workbook. Younger children, again, the workbook is designed for ages 5 to 10, roughly grades 1 through grades 5. But for the younger children, teachers will need obviously a little more time to read and explain. Again, I've tried this with first graders at this time of the year, and kids are reading about 85% of the words without any difficulty. Again, quarantine was the most difficult word they saw. At this age also, it's probably better for teachers to do this in small groups. Perhaps when you have your reading groups, you can take one group aside and work on parts of the workbook. And this gives teachers an opportunity to talk with children about various issues, and particularly as to become more comfortable with expressing their feelings, they'll be more comfortable talking about other issues. Particularly sometimes there's issues that comes up in class where kids are being unkind to somebody else, or some other issue that evokes emotions, strong emotions. Once they've had the experience of going through this book, they will be much more comfortable to talk to their teachers within a group setting and individually about what issues they may be facing. And finally, supplemental activities are recommended to augment the concepts and behaviors introduced. We have a teacher's guide, again, that will be presented if you have a individualized training session with us that has a number of supplemental activities like blowing bubbles and breathing techniques and muscle relaxation techniques that are helpful for teachers to help kids regulate their emotions as well. So that's some suggestions for ages 5 to 7. Then for ages 8 through 10, kids can work much more independently on the workbook. Although we don't want them to rush through it, it's important for them to stay, focused on X number of pages per week. It may be advisable to work the same few pages in the entire classroom. Kids can be on the same pages at the same time. And again, as kids get older, the book gives an opportunity for teachers to really open up some serious discussions about feelings and about solving problems and about dealing with emotions. So I want to also add, we have a number of resources available to schools that help deal with kids' feelings and emotions. First of all, the workbook is downloadable. If you haven't done it already, you can access the book online at the website on the top left corner, ohelfamily.org/workbook. We also put together a toolkit for the reentry to the COVID classroom that can be found on the Ohel website. Dr. Blumenthal was heavily involved in creating this, and particularly in terms of dealing with some of the symptoms of trauma and what to look for in kids. We have a whole section in there that breaks it down by developmental stages of what some of the symptomology looks like for children and maybe experiencing some distress. We also have developed 4 lesson plans for preschool, lower school, middle school, and high school that help kids process the corona experience, where they talk about what happened, they talk about the feelings they felt, and finally they focus on the future to give them hope. That's all involved in that. We haven't printed it up; it's just available as a free download, but you can get it going to our ohelfamily.org site, and there's a sign into the section that talks about coronavirus. You'll also see numerous webinars that Dr. Blumenthal has done. They're very, very instructive on just about every conceivable concept, thought, issue that's out there. We lost count how many webinars have been done, but it's an excellent resource for you. If you want an examination copy, you want to see the thing in real life, not just a download, they're available for professionals working in schools, working privately, school principals, especially if you want to get this for your school. In order to get the examination copy, just email our executive assistant, Laura Bart, Laura_Bart@ohelfamily.org, and she will send you out an examination copy that you can have. We've actually had some therapists have actually done this with if some of you online are in our mental health professionals, they have used this in working with young children in therapy. And if you are interested in doing it in your school, if you are a school administrator or school social worker who would like to implement this in grades 1 through 5 or whatever grade you're interested in, you can also order workbooks for your school. This project has been underwritten by the UJA Federation, and so therefore the cost of the books is really basically free to New York schools. There may be a slight charge in shipping and handling, but the books are basically free. We've already contracted with a number of schools already that have signed up for getting the workbooks and for training, so we can do that for you as well. Again, for the same person, Laura Bart at ohelfamily.org. And if you are interested in implementing a really comprehensive program, this is really what we'd like to do. for schools is we have this 5-point program here. Number one, customized teacher training, which includes the teacher's guide that we spoke about earlier that has supplemental activities in it, and the COVID-19 resilience workbook for grades 1 through 5. So you can get books for your entire school, or for those grades anyway, and the teacher training. And the teacher training can be virtual, as it most likely will be for the next few months, or if possible, it could be face-to-face. It really depends on the present situation. It goes from day to day, it changes. But either way, we would customize the training for your staff by having you, talk with me specifically and finding out what some of your needs are, and then we'll tailor make it. We also provide, with the grant from UJA Federation, COVID counseling for children who are specifically dealing with some specific issues related to COVID. Sometimes it's illness in the family, sometimes it's anxiety issues. So we have an itinerant social worker who can come to your school and help out, or meet with the child virtually. Given the fact that we think a systemic approach to helping children is really critical, we also will provide a parents' workshop. A sample of what one of those workshops might be is how parents can build resilience in their children during and after COVID, and also a teacher seminar. Again, not only those teachers that would be presenting the workbook, but all teachers who interact with kids should learn about the skills that are being taught in the workbook, as well as what's the classroom response to the collective trauma. When everybody's been traumatized, how do teachers respond to that classroom? And finally, teachers' self-care webinar. One of the things we keep forgetting is how important it is to take care of our teachers. So how do we take care of those who take care? So we have some self-care strategies for supporting educator resilience. And be thrilled to hear that Dr. Blumenthal will probably be presenting most of those seminars. So we're looking forward to schools signing up. Again, a few schools have already done that already as we break out the workbook. But schools that want to get in on the bandwagon, we're filling up a schedule now between now and Pesach to be able to disseminate the workbooks, to provide training for teachers, and to provide workshops for parents and teachers, and self-care for the faculty as well. So if you're interested in taking the next leap, you can contact me. That's my email address on the bottom of the page. And you can write that down. I can put it into the chat. And that's basically it.
Rabbi Liebtech, I can say this because I don't get commission. The download does not do justice to this. It's really beautiful, just so engaging and colorful, and the illustrations are very day school and yeshiva friendly. It's really beautiful done, and it's really worthwhile I recommend getting those hard copies.
Yeah.
I had a question, which was, if your child is not fortunate enough to be in a school that is presenting this workbook to the students, is this something you could do as a family activity?
Absolutely, as a family activity, individualized. It is. I've experimented this on a number of children, all right, and I'm just impressed how engaged they are in this workbook. I mean, you talked about the visual look, for example, but it's engaging. I think the questions are engaging, and almost as if kids are saying, "Somebody asked me these questions, help me, focus how I should deal with my feelings. How can I be in control?" And so the short answer is yes. So, do we have any questions in the chat? Because I know that people can't. Okay, we have. Any questions for Dr. Blumenthal? Any questions for me? I'm respectful of people's time, and I'm sure no one's going to complain about leaving early. But if there are any questions in terms of the workbook, in terms of issues about resilience, about kids and anxiety today.
I actually ask a question we hear a lot and we have to respond to when teachers and parents say, kids don't want to talk about COVID anymore. Who wants to talk about COVID? They're calm, they're managing. Why do we need to create tumult again? Why do we have to bring everything back?
Yeah, maybe I'll let Dr. Blumenthal answer that first, and then I'll pick up with Dr. Blumenthal.
Yeah, I'm hearing that more from the teenagers, that it would be first of all, who are craving the contact with their peers, maybe at a sort of different and more intensive level. and are more prone to challenge convention that adults provide. But again, this is not forcing the kids to address the issues. We give them the workbook, and it's not discussing it. It's using coloring and imagination, etc. So I think it's approaching it in a different fashion. I certainly would tell you that if you give it to a child and the child just clearly doesn't want to do it, or just it has an adverse reaction to it, we certainly wouldn't force it upon them. We'd give them something else, some other activity. But the other thing also, and I think that's important here also, is that some of the messages here are not direct and blatant and blunt. They're metaphoric. They're alluding, and I think that makes it easier for the children to address it, and as in a different medium that they're usually addressing it. We've found so far an enthusiastic response.
Mm-hmm. And if anybody else has questions in the chat, I don't see any questions in the chat.
I really, on behalf of Hinsparks, I just want to thank you again for doing this with us and exposing us to this, and the fact that further work can be done, and there is so much underwriting from the UJ is just a wonderful gift, especially to New York area schools, but to all the schools.
Yeah, I would hope that we have a lot of school personnel, school administrative personnel online who will be emailing me tomorrow for information how to move ahead. So we've been on a long journey tonight, so I want to thank everybody for participating and listening. We look forward to partnering, with you and to help all our children emerge from this pandemic more able to deal with adversity and develop healthy coping skills that will last a lifetime. So thank you all for participating.
Okay.
Have a wonderful good night. Dr. Blumenthal, thank you. Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Good night. Thank you so much
Good
again.
night.
Well, everybody, thank you.